Okay, and here we are. Welcome to the new and improved top 50 tracks of all time. As you can see, I have my first guest presenter here, which is my youngest daughter, Hazel. Say hello, Hazel.
Hello.
As I mentioned, obviously we had to look at different ways of doing the chart. The idea was that the top 20 was going to be released on the 14th of November, all at once, for a small gathering, and then possibly filtered out as videos for the rest of year between November and December. Things have changed. There's restrictions tied to restrictions in Sweden, which means I'm now not allowed, or I've been recommended strongly by the health organisation not to have my gathering on the 14th. The restrictions are going to be reviewed on the 19th of November. So what I've decided to do is postpone my gathering until the 21st of November, which means I've now decided to release tracks 20 to 11. And as I mentioned before, the idea with the 20 to 11 was that I was going to maybe get guest presenters in, which I have. And our first guest presenter is Hazel, who's presenting with me for this one. So we're going to look at number 20. And number 20 is a mover. And we've had a few movers recently that have been moving in the downward direction, but as you can see here with the little green arrow, this one has actually moved up. It's moved up 8 places and was number 28 in the last chart in the top 40. And so it's had a climb. It's had a long story, this one, but we'll get into who it is first, and then I'll tell you where the long story is. This is... the track is Purity by The God Machine and comes from the album Scenes from the Second Story. Here's the album. If you lift it up a little bit so they can see that. Perfect. Yeah, that's fine. You can put that back down now. Before we recorded this video, I actually played it to Hazel. I'm not sure. I play it quite a lot in the house, but I don't usually drag people in and say, just so you know, now I'm playing this particular track, and it's not available on Spotify. I've got it as I've taken it from the LP, so I only have it on certain devices. Hazel, what did you think of it?
That's good.
Yeah? Yeah? You were bopping along to it a little bit when it got going. A little bit of a shock there when Hazel realised it goes from classical music to hard rock. One of the great bits about the track. The story about this is I actually wrote this on Facebook not so long ago. But it all started with a weird situation when I was working in a supermarket, and either a colleague or a customer had left a cassette on a shelf. And that cassette had no inlay card in it, or it did, but it had no text on it. So I was curious what was on that cassette. So I went and popped it into a cassette player and played the side that was rewound, and Nirvana popped on immediately, an album I knew, so it was like, okay. No surprises there. I fast forwarded to a couple of songs, and it was the album, so it wasn't a compilation. So I fast forwarded all the way to the end of the cassette and then turned it over and put it on, and a wonderful, wonderful track hit my ears. And I had never heard it before and wanted to hear more, so I played the rest of the tape, and I could tell it was all the same artist, but I had no idea who it was. So I took it down to one of the local record shops. There were 2 across from each other on the street, one that had been established for quite some time, and a new one that had just opened. So I went into the first shop and said, I can't remember how it worked now. I went into one of the shops and they put it on, and they said, oh yeah, this is the Garden Machine. Or that's what I thought I heard. So I went to the other shop and asked for them if they could order the Garden Machine, and they had no idea what I was talking about. So then I went back to the first shop and said, seeing as the other shop didn't have a clue what it was, For some reason, I didn't ask them to play the tape. I asked the other shop if they could order it, and they said, yeah, no problem. So then I got a call when it had come in, and I went down and picked it up. And when I looked at the front cover and thought, this is actually the record is the one I bought and the one I ordered. They said, I said, oh, it's the God Machine. So that's probably why the other shop had no idea what it was. So that was in... Let's look at my stats here. 1991, so it's another one of the 90s, and it's been around since then. When I turned 25, I realised that I've made a really big mistake in not starting any of these charts. There is no top 20 when I turned 20. That's why I'm pushing this individual here to do a top 10 when she turns 10. So then she can look back and say, I've got a 10, a 20, 30, 40, 50, whereas I can only go back to 30 as my first official recorded, because when I was 25 I did 20, and this was actually number one in that 20. This was my number one track of all time when I was 25 years old, and a quarter of a century later, as I'm about to turn half a century, it is at number 20. But the interesting thing is that, like I said at the beginning, it's actually gone up 8 places, so it's moving back. Instead of falling gradually bit by bit, it's actually going up. So it is now number 20, one of the 20th best track of all time. It's an absolutely beautiful track. It starts off, you can easily use the word beautiful, and then it gets really hard and raw and nasty. The lyrics are basically just one verse, and then a chorus that's just basically repeated over and over again. That me and Hazel were singing towards the end of the when we played it then. I've also got such a big, I'm such a big fan of this album that I actually, with my publishing company, Morrigan Books, I actually first got going with an Australian version of the album, which is that I asked a lot of Australian authors to write songs inspired by each track. The wonderful Karen Warren, who you should have heard of, and if you haven't, go out and look for books by her now. She wrote this track, Purity, for the Australian version of Scenes from the Second Story, and then I myself and Sharon Ring edited the international version, and then we had T.A. Moore, who wrote Purity for that particular version. So we've got 2 versions of Purity in text form as inspirations, and quite a few of the people who wrote for these 2 anthologies were very impressed with the album and hadn't heard it before, so it was a way of pushing it. Added to that, one of the band members actually contacted me and said that they'd seen on my website that I was selling copies of a book with the name of their album on it. Would I be interested in telling them more about it? So I did, and they said they would love to read a copy, so I sent both copies to them. And also I sent 2 essays written by 2 of my students about the band as well, as they had chosen this track and another track as a task for me in an English course at the college. So there's lots of stories about this particular band, but I'll leave you to go off and listen to Purity, number 20, in the top 50 tracks of all time. I wonder who's going to be presenting the next one. Wait a couple of days and you'll see.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.